a high school student whose mom is terrorized and is killed by the resurgence of the Sweet 16 killer, a masked maniac that slaughtered a group of teenage girls in the 80s. With the help of her friend Amelia, she travels back in time to 1987 and teams up with the teen version of her mom to try and stop the killer. Set in a small, peaceful town called North Vernon, the movie begins with the narrator talking about a dark past from 35 years before. In October of 1987, a teenager named Tiffany Clark was murdered by someone inside her home's garage on the night of her 16th birthday. Only 2 days later, another girl, Marissa Song, was also found slaughtered at her family cabin in a secluded part of the woods. 2 days later, on the night of Halloween, a third girl, Heather Hernandez, had been brutally murdered at the parking lot of the amusement park in the town, Billy's Boardwalk. Incidentally, all 3 girls were 16 at the time of their murders, and they had all been stabbed 16 times by the killer, making it evident that they were all victims of one serial killer. Although the murderer did not kill anyone else after that, and their identity was never found out, some eyewitnesses had claimed that they always wore a very specific mask on their face. 35 years later, in 2023, this mask has become a popular icon in the town of Vernon, and many teenagers put on the face of the murderer on the night of Halloween. The town has also become popular among serial killer enthusiasts after they heard of the incidents on a podcast show by a true crime journalist, Chris Dubasage. Chris happens to be a resident of Vernon and also the narrator at the beginning of Totally Killer, as the man organizes a tour of the murder spots for fans every Halloween. Our protagonist, Jamie Hughes, is also a resident of the town, where she lives with her overprotective mother Pam, who reprimands her and tells her to lessen the sounds of the rock music she is listening to. Jamie then went downstairs and tries to convince her mother and her relatively less paranoid father, Blake. But there's enough reason for Pam's fears, for she was very close friends with the 3 girls who had been murdered back in 1987, who is with the same age with Jamie presently. Jamie wants to go to a concert with her friends on Halloween and convinces her parents. Eventually, the couple lets Jamie go, and Blake drives her to Amelia's house, one of her friends. Everyone in this tight-knit community town knows each other, as Blake is revealed to have grown up with Amelia's mother, Lauren, and also with Chris Dubasage, whose works he does not really approve of. Amidst such a scenario, a group of kids trick or treat to Pam's house, followed by a masked man. Pam laughs, thinking that the man is only trick or treating as it stares to her, but suddenly the man shows a knife. Pam immediately closes the door, but the man manages to barge in. Pam trained herself for that moment, anticipating that it would eventually happen to her. Pam struggles and manages to stun and stab the masked man, but unfortunately, she is overpowered by the masked man and stabs her to death. An absolute tragedy that struck Blakey and Jamie. The use of exactly 16 blows with the knife shows that the violent killer from the past is now back. After her mother's death, Jamie is understandably very grieved and saddened. But she also has a growing interest in helping her solve the case and find out the real killer. After classes, she is questioned by the sheriff, a woman named Kara, as she suspects that Blake could have been involved. However, Jamie immediately shuts this suspicion down and reveals that Kara's father used to be the sheriff in 1987, and the girl blames him for failing to solve the triple homicide. Jamie got angry by Kara's questions, so she leaves. While on her way to Amelia, she bumps to a man who stares at her as she walks away. She arrives at a carnival and meets her best friend Amelia, who is a science nerd and genius, just like her mother was during her time. Jamie then proceeds to walk home, but as she is walking home, a mysterious man is standing from afar stalking her. She returns home and continues to investigate by listening to news. Blake enters her room and talks with her. He talks to Jamie about her mom and tells Jamie not to resort on listening to Chris's podcast. Despite Blake telling her not to, Jamie still meets with the podcaster Chris after she learns that Pam has been in touch with him for some time now. However, there was no secret affair between the two, as Jamie initially suspected, but instead, Pam wanted to solve the case of the serial killer, and it was for this that she exchanged many texts with the journalist. Chris also reveals that Pam had apparently received a note with a death threat from the Sweet 16 killer 35 years ago. And it was only now that the murderer had acted on it. Hearing about the note and seeing its content, Jamie suddenly leaves and goes to Amelia. In the middle of the night, while Jamie is walking home, she bumps to her best friend and got surprised. While they are talking, a masked man appears behind Jamie who tries to stab Jamie. She quickly dodges and runs towards the carnival. Jamie hides in the photo booth stall, which is the time machine made by Amelia, and accidentally presses a button which makes a sound. The killer hears the sound and the lights coming out of the time machine. He rushes towards the time machine and tries to stab Jamie. In an effort to stab her, he plunges the knife into the control interface of a photo booth stall. This creates extra electricity, immediately starting up the time machine, and before the murderer can get to her, Jamie gets transported back to 1987, only a couple of days before the murders were supposed to take place. Amelia only mentions that the machine needs Wi-Fi to run, especially to bring one back to the present, but she does not realize that it needs an extra metal conductor to start working. This is exactly what happens when the Sweet 16 killer starts to chase Jamie one night, and in an effort to stab her, he plunges the knife into the control interface of a photo booth stall. After traveling to the past, Jamie bumps to a woman and asks her about her mother, Pam. Jamie immediately goes to the school, where she knows her mother was a student. Jamie enrolls to the school and proceeds to the gym class where she finds Tiffany, Marissa, and Heather. In fact, she very quickly learns that her mother, Pam, is part of a group of very close friends with the three others, and they are often very cruel and bullying towards the other students. After the gym activity, Jamie comes to the four and tries to convince them not to go to a party. The four girls obviously do not believe Jamie and even mocks and curses at her. She then goes to the erstwhile sheriff, Lim, and tries to convince him by telling him that she is from the future. This obviously does not work either, and so Jamie seeks help from the one person she has faith in, Amelia's mother, Lauren. Indeed, Lauren does take the teenager's words rather seriously because the woman had already started thinking and working on building a time machine, but had not told anyone about it and her notebook. They immediately go towards the carnival where the time machine is. Jamie tells Lauren that isn't working at first, but functions after the masked man stabs the control interface. Lauren inspects and tells her that the machine doesn't work at first due to the lack of metal conductor. Meanwhile, in the future, Jamie starts missing, and the police, together with Chris, is starting an investigation where Blake starts asking the police about Jamie. Going back, while Lauren dedicates her time to fixing the time machine and ensuring a safe return for Jamie, Jamie decides to get the murders avoided by any means necessary. Knowing that Tiffany would be killed inside her garage during her 16th birthday party, Jamie crashes the party with the help of Lauren. Here, she sees the younger version of Randy Finkel and Doug Summers. In her present timeline in 2023, Randy is the Vernon High School athletics coach, while Doug is the principal of the school. But back in 1987, Randy was a harsh bully and Doug was a nerd. She also gets introduced to young Kara, whom she initially suspects to be the murderer. They tried to get in, but Randy rejects and does not let them go inside. Doug then leads them to another entrance, which is entering the house by climbing the wooden fence of the house. They manage to get inside and see a hot-looking guy who appears to be Blake, Jamie's father, who is presently in a relationship with Tiffany. Blake bullies Chris, who takes pictures of them, and Jamie defends him. Tiffany got annoyed and requests Randy to kick them out of the party. Jamie stubbornly comes back and sees Tiffany and Blake breaking up, hearing that Tiffany cheated on her. In the bedroom of the house, Tiffany and Eddie Rock, the rock star Jamie is listening to, are making out and are about to have sex. Meanwhile, Jamie listens to a recording of Chris to know the place where Tiffany will be murdered. She immediately goes to the garage, but finds someone else in it. Jamie suddenly realizes that the location of Tiffany's murder can change since she was living in the past, and the murder had not yet taken place. Indeed, the teenager is now killed inside her parents' bedroom instead of the garage, stabbed multiple times. The police come to investigate and are about to make Jamie a suspect because she knows what happened. But Pam stops them and tells them that Jamie is truly trying to save Tiffany. The two tail Tiffany and tell her that she should not walk home alone. Jamie then also tells her that the rest of them are next and lies that she is a psychic who sees the future. Pam believes Jamie, and they proceed to Pam's house to talk about the situation. Going back to the future, the change in the place of the murder in the past also changes the history in the current timeline of 2023. The podcaster, Chris, suddenly realizes that he had been remembering the information wrong, and it was instead in the bedroom where the brutal murder had taken place. When he shares this with Amelia, the girl tells Chris about how her time machine had taken Jamie into the past, which is also clearly seen in photographs from that time, which have now automatically changed. For the next murder, Jamie tries to prevent the group from going to the cabin in the woods and convinces Marissa to take them all to her parents' condo instead. After they talk, they proceed to laboratory activities, and Jamie partners with Damon, who is rumored to be violent. The day comes, and they go to the condo of Marissa's parents. What Jamie does not realize is that this condo is actually the very same cabin in the woods, and the group ultimately ends up at this very place. The group has fun the whole day and parties in the middle of the woods, while Jamie is still worried. Randy gets annoyed with Jamie and ends up closing the door to her and locks the door from the outside. Soon, as night falls, Jamie tries to continually warn them, but they cannot hear her from the inside. Eventually, the group is attacked by the same murderer, wearing his iconic mask, but there is a major change in this regard as well. Instead of Marissa, who was supposed to die, it is Heather who is killed by the murderer, changing the sequence of deaths. The group tries to fight back and capture the perpetrator. However, the masked man is too good and manages to knock them all and escape. The group goes to the police station after the murder and reports what happened. Blake suspects Kara is responsible for the crime, where Kara gets furious and leaves. The next day at school, Jamie suspects Damon and tries to sneak into his van, but she finds nothing but garbage. Damon catches her, and Jamie thinks that he is about to kill her. But it appears that Damon is innocent and is a nerd who loves to play video games. Thinking of ways to fight back against this mysterious killer, Jamie makes a plan in which all members of the group will hide inside the haunted house attraction at the amusement park. Since they know that it would be Marissa who would be killed, the rest hide inside the place, waiting for the murderer to appear so that they can apprehend him. Marissa gets inside the horror, while the others get ready with a bat already inside. The masked man also goes inside to kill Marissa. Little did he know the group is just luring him inside. The masked man catches Jamie hiding first and tries to attack her, but Blake comes to help. The group, one by one, pounces and attacks him. Jamie manages to stab the masked man at the back, and the masked man angrily attempts to stab Jamie in return. Fortunately, Kara comes to kill the murderer with a scythe, and it is then that the mask is removed from the figure's face, who appears to be Doug. A year ago, one of the students at the school, named Trish, died in a horrific car accident after she crashed into a tree while driving under the influence of alcohol. In reality, the terribly insensitive group of bullies was responsible for this death, as they used to constantly call the girl Fat Trish because of her physique. To make matters worse, the three girls, Tiffany, Marissa, and Heather, had invited Trish to Tiffany's house one night for a sleepover. The real reason behind this plan was to get Trish very drunk and make her spill the beans about her supposed affair with one of the coaches at their school. The girls kept pushing their classmate into drinking more and more, and they did not stop even when Trish started crying and was evidently disturbed by the whole bullying. It was after this that the girl left the place in an extremely drunk and disturbed state and died in a car accident that night. As it turns out, Trish was the girlfriend of Doug Summers, and the young man was left grieving the loss of his lover. He had eventually found out about the three girls and their cruel sleepover, and it was for this reason that Doug started to put on the mask and kill each of the girls one after another. By pulling off the mask from the dead body, Jamie reveals that Doug was the real Sweet 16 killer. Although Doug lies dead, a second man wearing the same serial killer mask slits Marissa's throat, making sure that the three original murders do indeed take place. The teenagers now run out of the place, followed by the serial killer who also murders the veteran journalist, Norm Dubassage, Chris's father, on the way. Lauren and Jamie manage to go to the time machine Lauren made, while the killer goes inside as well. Lauren jumps outside while the killer tries to finish Jamie. While he is about to stab Jamie, Pam jumps behind him and helps Jamie. They fight back and struggle to bring the murderer down. Until some point, it is revealed that it is actually Chris Dubasanya who is the second killer, and it is he who murdered Pam Hughes in 2023. 35 years after the serial killings, Chris wanted to create buzz about the murders once again, as that would be immensely profitable for his podcasts, live feed videos, and also his tours. Therefore, he had killed Pam and lied about the woman having been threatened by the original. After learning from Amelia that Jamie had traveled back to the past, Chris feared that the girl would find out the real truth. So he killed Amelia to use her time machine and appeared in 1987 inside the haunted house attraction. As Jamie intends to return to her present, she makes use of the quantum drop ride at the park to trigger the time machine and start it up. Before this happens, though, she manages to kill Chris, so the man cannot return. When Jamie makes it back to 2023, none of Chris's actions exist, meaning that Amelia and Pam are both alive. Jamie hugs her parents warmly and tells them how she loves them. There are some minor changes in the world, though, because of the alterations in the past. Since Pam and Blake became lovers much earlier in this altered timeline, they now have an older son, whom they have named Jamie. The Jamie we have been following for so long is now named Colette. Since Doug Summers was killed, he is no longer alive in 2023, and it is Randy, earlier the athletics coach, who is the principal of the school. Lastly, the Chris of this timeline is reported to be living in some monastery in India, since the man had been traumatized after seeing his father's death on live TV without having any idea that it was him from a different timeline.